Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. Today, I have a upload that I'm very excited to share with you. Some research and some just absolutely terrifying experiences. Before we jump into it, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click the bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment and share the video. Why? Well, because these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. They are appreciated and they do matter. And now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to today's upload, shall we? So for quite some time now, I have been talking a little bit about a 5-state kind of epicenter, an East Coast 5-state epicenter or hotspot. And I do believe it to be North Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky. And I don't include any other states in that because from that 5-state epicenter, the experiences go north, south, west a little bit. I do believe there are other hotspots or epicenters throughout the United States, just these 5 states being the eastern coast's biggest epicenter. And I do believe it's can be proven because of a lot of the government activity. Oak Ridge, Tennessee, Virginia. I don't even need to say any more. You just say Virginia, and that is a state infested with the federal government, an FBI agent being torn apart in Nantahala, which is in North Carolina. Then you've got the attacks, Brenda Hamilton, and it just keeps going. The Tony Aarons, Amber Miller out of Tennessee. And it goes down from there. You've got Corey Godsey and the other lady in Letcher County from Kentucky. Nancy Shaw is right underneath North Carolina. If you look at where she was attacked, it is right there. And that's what I mean, where it spreads out. Those 5 states, these folders are all subscriber submitted experiences out of those 5 states. I did a quick comparison, and I took it's broken down here, the 5-state epicenter. Then you've got the southern East Coast, northern East Coast, and the western Great Lake region. Now, the South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi comparison file-wise was not even close to being the thickness of this one. The northeastern, which consisted of Maryland, Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. The only reason why it was even close to being as thick as that, one, because there's like 5 more states, and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania sits right under or right above West Virginia. And when I say epicenter, the attacks and experiences go out from there. Ohio is not in the northeastern, it's in the Great Lakes region. That has got quite a few experiences, and I believe because it sits, you've got West Virginia and you've got Kentucky and you've got Ohio right there. I think that's, when these creatures, I don't like to say migratory. I think they are nomadic. Migration means to usually go south for the winter. Nomadic, I think they travel and follow the food, like a lot of the Plains Native Americans. That's a huge reason why some Plains Indian or Plains Native American tribes would use teepees. They could break them down. They could drag them with their horses. They could put all of their gear and every possession they own, nomadic, to follow the food. And that's what I believe these creatures do. I also think that these 5-state hotspot or epicenter is these 5 states because it's kind of when people say Appalachia, they think that area, right? And that is the area that the federal government and the rich coal mine or rich coal industry used up the workers, the land, and yeah, they got paid good money in the beginning. But when everything was said and done, the money was, the work was done, the money's gone. There's the depression, there's the drug addiction, there's the mental illness. And I believe 100%, and I've said this for years, that these creatures are attracted to that. Just out of the research that I've done and looking into these accounts from subscribers, I can honestly say 70 to 80% of people who have had an experience with these creatures has had an issue with addiction or mental illness. There's a reason to that. There's also a reason to why the government and media, when there's an attack, Tony Aarons, Amber Miller, Christopher Whiteley down in Texas, and others, Colorado, there's a few, that the media just really slanders the people, the victims. And I've said this for 3 to 4 years now. It is not new news to this channel. I know that other people are now saying it and using that idea, and that is great. I think the news should get spread around that this is a real thing, that these creatures are attracted to depression, despair, addiction, mental illness. So that's where that epicenter. So you've got that, you've got the government and their misdeeds and bad dealings, and a lot of crazy encounters. So let's get into it. Today's first experience, subscriber submitted experience out of that 5-state epicenter, comes to us from the great state of Kentucky. This encounter happened when I was 10 years old. I have had 3 encounters, this being the first. I have family that lives near the LBL, and I've visited them all the time. The area that my granddad lived in is heavily wooded with a long gravel driveway. I was always allowed to play outside, but my granddad made it very clear to be in the house before sunset. I would play around the house till dusk, At the time, my granddad had a very large German Shepherd mix Great Dane named Sergeant. Sergeant was a protective dog who would never leave my side while I was playing. I remember playing in the back of the property, and I was kicking an old ball against a tool shed with Sarge lying down on a stone walkway. I guess time had gotten away from me, and it started to get dark. As I kicked the ball one last time, I heard a long, drawn-out growl from the right of me, and it was Sergeant. His hair was standing on end, looking at the woods. As I looked, I could now see a shadow of something moving in the woods. As it drew closer, I could see its shape. It was down on all fours, staring at Sergeant. At this point, it is almost black outside. I remember Sergeant starting to bark ferociously. I guess this upset the creature because it in return growled back. The vibration from this growl shook my rib cage. The animal took a step out of the tree line, baring its teeth at us. About this time, I heard a loud boom followed by intense ringing in my ear. My granddad had shot at the creature. I don't remember if he hit it, but I remember it tearing back into the woods. Granddad then pulled me back up the walkway to the porch with Sergeant following behind. Granddad was angry with me. He was yelling at me the whole time back to the house. I had never heard my grandfather yell, and I started to cry. As we entered the house, my grandmother looked like she had seen a ghost, and I was sent upstairs to go to sleep. I awoke in the middle of the night to my grandmother and grandfather talking about what happened. My grandfather said, "I never thought it would get this close to the house. I think I hit it this time, I'm not sure." My grandmother then intervened, saying, "You better hope you didn't hit it. Don't you remember what happened last time you shot at it, what it did to Daisy?" Daisy was an old dog that they owned a few years back. I was always told that she had run away from home. I picked up the pieces pretty quick, that this thing butchered Daisy and left a pile of what used to be her around the house. Well, the argument started to die down between them, and 20 minutes later it was silent, and everyone was starting to rest. I was trying to go back to sleep. I think a couple of hours later, my sleeping body was flung awake to Sergeant barking at the window. And about 35 yards up a hill, looking directly at me, was that creature. It had yellowish, amber-colored eyes. The pupils looked blank of compassion, only full of evil, and they were fixated on me. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even breathe. Then all of a sudden I screamed, and as soon as I did, this creature stood on its hind legs, running further back up the hill, dipping behind the ridge. My granddad came running up the stairs with his deer rifle and flung open the door to my room. I asked him, what was that thing? He said it was a bear. I could tell that he was lying because he was in a cold sweat and on the verge of crying. He told me not to be scared in a shaky voice and told me to go to sleep with my grandmother. I awoke to the smell of bacon and eggs in the morning. Granddad was sleeping heavily in the living room chair with his rifle on his lap, overlooking the door. I wasn't allowed outside for the rest of my stay, and the last few days of my stay were uneventful. I gave my grandmother and grandfather a big hug, and my parents picked me up and I went back home. It brings a lot of emotions back up that I tried to hide away. But the experiences that I've heard from the LBL bring the emotions back to light. I'm literally shaking typing this out right now. My granddad has since passed, but my grandmother is still alive up at that house. Sergeant, of course, has passed as well. He lived to be 15. He was a good old boy. I know now why my grandfather was always so strict on the woods. I have since been told his experience. If you'd like to hear that, let me know. Thanks, Jeff. It feels good to get this off my chest. I have two other experiences, 16 and 18. I am 24 now, by the way. I will type them out shortly to you. Thank you. And he did. He absolutely shared those experiences. And this is the second experience that he had in the LBL region. Jeff, this experience happened in the LBL. At the time, I was staying with my grandparents for about a month. During this time, I agreed to go camping in the LBL. The LBL is beautiful. The lake is so beautiful and peaceful. The trails are always nice. And the nature really helps you clear your mind. My girlfriend at the time owned a camper. For the sake of keeping her private, we will call her Jessica. I'm an avid outdoorsman. I love nature. I have a deep respect for it. And I'll always be in the woods. Jessica, on the other hand, doesn't like the woods. She loved spending time with me. The first day was uneventful. We hiked for a little bit and then went to the lake and then went back to the camper. The second day, Jessica and I went hiking for a lot longer than we expected. We ended up back at the camper with a few hours of daylight. We sat at the camper for a little while to regain some energy. Jessica said she wanted to see the stars with me at night. Me being tired from hiking all day, I was reluctant, but I agreed. We exited the camper to the moonlight and proceeded to start an almost 20-minute walk to the lake. About 15 minutes into the walk, I noticed how silent it truly was. The normal sounds were absent. No crickets, owls, not even the wind seemed to be blowing, and I didn't pay much attention to that, me being 16, and I was focused only on one thing. By the way, my girlfriend was older than me at the time. We made it to the lake and had to walk down to the shore a little ways. I then set the blanket out. After an hour of watching the stars, things started to heat up. I then noticed the woods and the lake was absolutely silent. Usually when the woods go silent, there is a predator about. That is a great indicator. I started to get this overwhelming feeling of being watched. All of a sudden, that primal fear I felt at my granddad's house came flooding back. Just about this time, Jessica pointed out to the tree line. I swear I just saw something large move behind a tree. I instantly jumped up and grabbed her hand and told her that we needed to leave now. She was confused and wanted answers. I knew what this thing was in the woods, and I proceeded to grab her hand and pull her toward the trail. We got onto the trail, only for my worst fear to be confirmed. I looked back to the meadow to see this thing low to the ground, slowly crawling toward us. I then told Jessica that we needed to move fast, and I kept looking back to see where it had gone. 2 minutes into the trail, I looked back to see the creature getting onto the trail. I looked at Jessica and told her not to look back down the trail and to keep moving forward. As soon as I finished that statement, she did exactly what I told her not to do, and she saw it, and she froze in fear. I had to pull her forward to try and keep her moving. The creature at the time was roughly 100 yards down the trail. When she finally snapped out of it, she started to cry profusely. I tried to get her to move forward. In that 5-second window, I lost track of it. All of the senses kicked into overdrive, trying to hear or see where this thing had gone. Eventually, she started to move again. We made good time, maybe 5-10 minutes left on the trail. My senses were at the time on high alert, still trying to see if I could see this creature and if it was following us. I suddenly got hit with the smell of rotten meat and dog urine adjacent to me. My heart sank when I saw a shadow maybe 15 yards off the trail. I told Jessica, move faster, and she stood, still demanding answers, so I yelled, move faster. This shocked the creature. His ears twitched like a dog's would. The creature sat there for a second, then all hell broke loose. The creature stepped back onto the trail, and Jessica locked eyes with this creature. She was frozen in fear again for seconds. She was standing there, frozen. Suddenly, she screamed, and the creature then stood up on its hind legs, its full height, and roared at us. The sheer size of this thing is out of the world. The path was easily 5 feet wide where he stood, and when I was 16, I was 6'1". I thought I was tall. This thing was easily 2.5 feet taller than I. I grabbed Jessica by the hand and ran as hard and as fast as we could down the trail. I felt tears streaming down my face. I started seeing my life flash before my eyes. I thought to myself, will I ever see my family again? Will they ever know what happened to me? About this time, I snapped back into running. I looked up the trail and saw the trailhead. I heard the thing chasing after us. It sounded like a 18-wheeler in the forest with full head of steam. We burst into the clearing with Jessica hot on my heels. My lungs felt like I was breathing lava. I did not hear it running after us when we got halfway through the clearing. We didn't stop. We just kept running till we got to the camper. I slammed the door behind us both of us crying. We sat there in silence for what felt like hours. Then she broke the silence. WTF was that? In between sobbing breaths. I knew exactly what it was, and I told her I didn't know. I cuddled her, trying to calm her down for 30 minutes at least. And during that time, she fell asleep. I tried to stay awake, but from the adrenaline rush finally ending, I fell asleep with her. I awoke to heavy footsteps on the gravel. My heart skipped a beat, and I heard whatever this thing was do a large sniff and walk a few laps around the camper and then leave. I did soon fall asleep again. I awoke to the sounds of the birds chirping. I sat there for a few minutes and heard nothing. I exited the camper and instantly got hit with the strongest stench of dog urine, 50 times stronger than ammonia. I heard Jessica start to stir in the camper. I walked back into the camper and told her not to talk about what happened to anybody. We gained our composure and left early in the morning. Jessica and I are still close. She's still one of my best friends. I talk to her daily. That happened almost 10 years ago, and we've only talked about it twice. She flat out refuses to talk about it to this day. I tried to ask her about it a couple days back, hoping that I could get some more details from her side of the experience. She shot me down instantly. Now, really quick, I had mentioned this prior during yesterday's upload where Brad had made mention of pheromones, and certain people have had multiple experiences because their body puts out a pheromone. Donald Coleman Jr. Was actually the first person to bring that up to me a while back. I brought it up because DJ has had multiple experiences out of that great state of Virginia. But Steph, the private contractor who used to guard precious metal mines, he had made statements about that as well. And I think that this young man has had or does have that same kind of chemical reaction, that pheromone release, and they are attracted to the person. This being his last encounter, and he had shared this with me. Let me see if I have the exact date. This was his first encounter he sent me back in 2020. So, hey Jeff, I've always loved the outdoors. I've been in the woods ever since I was 6. I love hunting, fishing, hiking. This encounter happened when I was 18. Like I said, my granddad owned a large chunk of property. We worked hard to keep the property healthy year-round. I remember learning about this buck, which was a good-sized boy at the time, a 12-pointer with a beautiful spread. I studied his scrape lines and his morning routine. The day finally came, opening morning of rifle season. I got up at around 4:30 in the morning, eager to get to my stand. I hit the woods in full stride, getting to my stand, hoping that I could intercept the big buck on his way to his bed. The crack of dawn started to come through the trees. The birds were well and alive. The forest was active with the normal sounds until about 7. The woods then went dead silent around 8. A few minutes went by, and I heard the crunching of leaves on the top of the ridge. Walking the scrape lines, the deer left. My heart started to beat fast, thinking I was going to bag this monster buck. I soon realized that it was not a deer walking toward my stand. The animal sounded too heavy to be a deer. I got an uneasy feeling, followed by a deep sense of dread and danger. I soon smelled that same smell from a few years back and started to panic. I felt my heart beating faster. I realized I had my .270 on me with a few spare rounds in my pocket. I got a sense of confidence. The creature got about halfway down the valley, maybe 60 yards or so away from me. I didn't make a sound. I went stiff as a board, hoping the creature wouldn't see me. He got right in front of my stand, about 70 yards away. This creature turned and instantly locked eyes with me. I was in a panic. I pulled up my rifle and looked down the sight. The creature growled. The vibrations were strong enough for me to feel them through the metal bottom of the stand. I loaded a shot, and the creature growled even louder. My mind told me not to shoot. It wouldn't help you. It will piss this thing off even more. I lowered my rifle, and the creature started to pace around the base of the tree. Where my stand was, after a few laps, the creature kept on going down the pathway. I stayed in my stand for what seemed like hours. I knew the creature wasn't gone. I still had that feeling of being watched. Eventually, it subsided and the woods started to go back to life. I eventually made my way down from the stand. I didn't hunt the rest of the season. Looking back on it, I have zero idea on how that creature saw or knew I was there. I sprayed my scent removal kit before I entered the woods. I was wearing my camo, and I had my top of my stand covered with a blind. I felt powerless, even with my rifle. This creature knew what rifles were. I don't know how, but he definitely did. I am still a little hesitant to enter those woods. I have never returned to the back of that property. I only hunt the front side now. All right, in that first email that he shared with us, he had made mention of his granddad having an experience. Obviously, his grandparents were well aware of what these creatures were. They were not ignorant to these creatures being in their woods around their home. So sorry my granddad's experience took so long to share. I've had a lot of family issues recently, and I've not had a chance to type them out. This experience was told to me by my grandmother, and she is getting up there in age now, so some details might be left out or a little blurry. But I will do my best to tell what I have been told. My granddad was stubborn as a mule. I've watched that man chase bear off our back porch. He was not scared of anything, or so I thought. My granddad had grown up on his farm. He worked that farm day in and day out. The farm used to be full of farm animals. He used to have chickens, cows, goats, horses, and such. That's how he made his living. At around 5 a.m, he was awoken to the chickens squawking, the wings flapping frantically, so the first thought that came to his mind was fox or coyote. So he grabbed his 12-gauge and ran to the chicken coop, which at the time was behind the house and down a little walkway a ways. As he rounded the bin, he saw a massive hole in the chicken wire, and he described it as if a man took a head start and jumped clean through the side of the coop. On the inside, chicken guts and feathers lied everywhere. Thinking the animal that had done this probably heard him coming and ran back into the woods, he headed back to the shed to get a bucket and a shovel to clean up the mess. The shed was a little ways off by the house, so he started to walk toward the house, and he got hit with a sensation of being watched. At this time, the sun is barely starting to break through the clouds, and he could now see shadows. He soon realized that he was being stalked by something. He said he became frozen in fear when he realized that he was being circled by this creature. He put a round in his shotgun and shot at this creature. This made the creature irate and straight up pissed. As soon as he shot at the creature, he started to run to the house. My granddad's father had heard the commotion and came outside to see his son running up the path, followed by what he thought was a bear he had shot with his 12 gauge, pelting it in the face, causing it to run off into the woods. That was his first experience. For everyone that wants to see a dogman, let me tell you from personal experience, just stay out of the woods. You might not be as lucky. These creatures are fast, strong, and as stupid as it sounds, I believe they hold grudges. The dogman my granddad encountered was gray and maybe 6 feet tall. From the shot to the face of that dogman, its wound scarred over. A few years later, a few years of his farm became a living hell because of a young dogman that was irate. All right, so the next encounter I want to share is out of Kentucky. But in the beginning of the upload, I had talked about how the epicenter in the experiences just, go down and up and out. Well, not out that way because we're on the East Coast. But I said that PA and Ohio, both in two different geographics, PA being in the Northeast, Ohio being in the Western Great Lake region, the epicenter being central, East Coast. But Ohio sits in that nook of West Virginia, Kentucky, and right there is Ohio. And to me, Ohio's subscriber submitted folder and all of the encounters that I've just heard from Ohio, reading books or, watching documentaries on these creatures, Bigfoot, Dogman, whatever. You hear PA in Ohio, and that only solidifies the epicenter kind of idea for me. And this experience is a little different because it happens in a larger city. Jeff, feel free to share my experience if you think it may help someone. My name is Scott, and I live in a suburban city in northern Kentucky, 10 minutes from downtown Cincinnati. I'm surrounded by subdivisions. There are little patches of wooded areas all throughout the city. The Ohio River is about 5 miles of woods over the hill from me. You can see the river if you go down to the bottom of the next street over. It was late September or early October when I started noticing things, strange things. I wake up at 4 a.m. during the weekdays for work. The first thing I do is smoke a cigarette on the front porch and read the paper on my phone. About a week before, I started noticing helicopters flying around the area where I live. They were loud and flew very low. I could feel the vibrations in my chest. They were so low. I have had the same morning routine for 10 years, and I've never heard a helicopter at that time of the morning. This particular morning, I heard an owl hoot. I have never heard or noticed an owl in 40 years that I've lived in my house. The hoot seemed a little off. I remember thinking, that was weird. The next morning, I'm out there and I hear the owl hoot again, but this time 2 other owls chime in. All 3 sounded off. This time, I remember laughing at it because it sounded so funny. I always thought owls lived alone and were very territorial. I was kind of thinking that it was a little strange too. The deer population in the city region is large. They are almost like dogs. They're everywhere. They come right up to the house at night and graze in the grass, and they're always out there that time of the year. I started noticing the deer not being around, and I didn't think too much of it. The third night, I'm on the porch and I heard a branch snap and the owls again. The snap was loud. Out of nowhere, I heard dogs throughout the neighborhood going totally berserk. I had never heard the dogs act like that before. I kind of felt sorry for the owners because the barking was so loud and these dogs seemed uncontrollable. Once again, another strange morning. A couple of days go by with nothing out of the ordinary except for the helicopters flying low, but I wasn't thinking too much about the previous days. Maybe on the fifth day of the sequence of events, the dogs went nuts again, the owls were back, and I heard what sounded like clicking noises behind my neighbor's house. I had never heard that sound before in my life. At work that day, I mentioned the things that had taken place to my coworker. Trying to be funny, he said it must be a Bigfoot. We laughed and got on with our day. The next morning is when I realized there's something going on that is not normal. Out of nowhere, I hear this perfect whistle across the street behind the woods of my neighbor's house. My first thought was, who would be whistling at 4 a.m? This whistle was pristine and very loud. It was crisp and sounded perfect. I am not going to lie, I was scared. It scared the hell out of me. I've always been told not to respond or whistle back when you were in the woods. I started looking into all these strange occurrences, and everything I read and watched pointed to something cryptid. I thought, there's no way. So, of course, my senses are heightened, and I start paying attention to every noise that I hear throughout the next couple of weeks. But the thing is, it all stopped. Nothing. No more owl, tree breaks, dog barking, helicopters, and the deer were back. Absolutely nothing. After a week or two, I stopped thinking about what had happened, and life was back to normal. Fast forward, March of 2022. The helicopters are back. The deer disappeared again. The owls were back. The neighbors' dogs were going nuts. And I heard the clicking noises again. This went on for about a week. I started to watch some YouTube channels, which is how I found your channel. The whole time I'm thinking there is no way it's one of these creatures, Dogman or Bigfoot. There's just no way. On the morning of March 23rd, I'm outside in the morning when I hear the clicking and popping noises, but it sounded very close this time. I looked up and across the street, and I saw an 8-foot bipedal creature in my neighbor's front yard staring right at me. I froze, not moving a muscle. I could only see the silhouette with the lighting that was there. This thing was huge. After seconds, I snapped out of it and stood up just to make sure I wasn't seeing things. I definitely was not. The creature looked like it had turned its head and walked down the side of the house through the mulch bed and disappeared. The whole thing lasted maybe 10 to 20 seconds. I was floored. I could not believe it. I was second-guessing myself, but I know what I saw. Getting ready for work that morning was a blur. I parked my Jeep directly across from where it walked down the driveway. The sun was just coming up. I had to pump myself up just to get to the car. When I finally got to the door, I ran to my vehicle, looking down to the area where it had walked, and in the mulch bed, there were footprints. This blew my mind. Just unbelievable. There was no way I was getting out to take a picture or investigate. When I got to work, I did not say a word about it, since I figured my coworkers wouldn't believe me anyway. I've told a couple family members, and of course they just laughed it off. I guess that comes with the territory. The footprints stayed visible in that mulch bed for maybe a week, but washed out when it rained. I'm kicking myself for not getting closer and looking at them, but I was afraid my neighbor saw me down there. He'd think I was nuts. they say to themselves, and I didn't know how they'd react if they saw me rooting around in their yard. I wish I would have done it, though. I had never given much thought to Bigfoot or Dogman. The cryptid world just never crossed my mind, especially in a big city. Seeing is believing, and I know what I saw. For all I know, this has been happening every year since I've lived here, and probably for thousands of years before. But the thing is, they are so stealthful that people just never pay attention to the small details going around there. The scary part is, they are so close to every single one of us, not just the Pacific Northwest or forests with tons of acreage. They are literally right in our backyards, and it doesn't matter where you live. These creatures may migrate or pass through my area. The river is close, and there are train tracks down there also. It's a nice pipeline to get from one point to another. I still hear strange things on occasion, but not the amount of activity I was getting at the end of fall and the beginning of spring. I am definitely aware now, and my eyes and ears are always open. Thanks, Jeff, for doing what you do and bringing awareness to the subject. People need to be aware that these things are out there and start paying attention to their surroundings. They are everywhere. I've been thinking about setting up a recording device in my yard to see if I can catch something on it. I'll keep you posted on my endeavors and hopefully be able to get some proof for the naysayers. Take care and God bless. Scott. All right, so I've shared Tennessee's experiences just a couple weeks ago or a week ago. The Chilhowee park ranger who was involved in the locating the young girl who was savagely attacked and found. Her mom and brother were she died. Mom and brother survived and were taken to a hospital, but the little girl did die, and the news media said it was a bear attack. Subscriber is married to the gentleman who was at the scene of that and worked for the park at the time and knew it was not a bear because they had government, military, whatever you want to call it, a kill team came in to also help locate the girl's body and take out the creature. So I won't go there. We got Virginia, DJ, and I've talked about Tazewell, Buchanan, Pocahontas, and there's a whole bunch that happened in Virginia. So we'll just jump into North Carolina quick. Jeff, my name is Mark. I'm 47 years old, and I live in Cleveland County, North Carolina. When I was younger, somewhere between 8 and maybe 11, I'm not really sure. Anyhow, I was spending the night at my cousin's house, who was 2 years older than me and a girl. Another one of our cousins was also spending the night too. She was the eldest of us three. She was 3 years older than me. They were, and still are, my favorite cousins. They were both tomboys at the time, and Lynn, the older cousin, was a ball player and a little more athletic than me or Amy. They were both a head taller than I, as I had not grown hardly any. We were walking through a pine forest that had been replanted after it had been cleared out years earlier. We came across a leg in the woods, a large calf's leg. It was fresh, as if the blood was still wet. It looked like it had just been ripped off. You could see tendons and everything. Amy said that some of her relatives had some cows on family land, well over 100 acres, that her grandparents homesteaded. Her granddad was full Cherokee. Grandmother was half German, half Cherokee. Anyhow, we were not freaked out by the leg. God knows why, 'cause I don't. So we kept walking deeper into the forest, exploring. Well, we eventually came to a large field, maybe 300 yards across, with sporadic pine that were probably 10 feet tall, maybe a little less. when we saw something that is medium to dark brown standing almost directly in the middle of the field. It looked like it was on all fours, and it looked huge. Lynn yelled that it was a bear. Well, I heard her and turned around, and it wasn't on all fours, and it was huge. When it turned around, it dropped the calf that was looking, and it was looking right at us. We didn't get a good look. We didn't get a look at whether it had a snout or a flat face because we were hauling ass. Turns out Lynn wasn't the fastest, nor was Amy. I hauled ass so much, so I got clipped by limbs and fell, but I got right back up and made it out of the woods first. We told my mom and Amy's mom, and they told our dads when they had gotten back from a side job, upholstering recliners. Me and Amy took them to where we saw the calf's leg. It was still there, but they couldn't make out any tracks because the ground was hard and covered with pine needles. Lynn didn't go back in the woods because she called her mom and dad to get her. So we showed them the field where we saw whatever we saw, and we found the tree it was standing near. They found blood and trampled weeds. Now, we didn't go in the woods unarmed. My dad had a 7mm Magnum rifle and a .44 revolver. Amy's dad had a .30-06. Now, my uncle is a tall guy, maybe 6'4". He stood next to the tree that it was at, and me and Amy went to where we were standing, and Stephen looked small beside that tree, but didn't. We went back to the house, headed home later. The next couple of days brought more incidents. Something tapped on Amy's window one night, and tracks were found, and it was big, I was told. Something also left a muddy mark on the side of Amy's grandparents' house, way up high, and more tracks were found. This time, as time went on, more and more people saw something, and it was given the name Knobby because of the mountain it was seen is called Ben's Knob. Well, there you go, 100% true. As a matter of fact, Amy was at my mom's yesterday, and we were talking about it like it's burned in our minds. I think my wife believes we saw what we saw. Have a good day. All right, so I had mentioned Nantahala and an FBI agent that was killed out there. There's 2 subscribers that are brothers. One is no longer with us. His name's Terry, and his brother Jody is still with us. Terry reached out to me first, and he's the one that told me to look into this case. So Nantahala is a national park in North Carolina, and there had been a large amount of dogmen spotted in this area, and this is like 2015, somewhere around there, 2015, back then, some years ago. Not years ago as me being almost 50 in 2 years, but, some time ago. And a FBI photographer was deployed out there to take photos of these creatures. Terry only knew of this because of people that he had talked to. This lady was interviewing people and such. So she and her husband go out into Nantahala, and there was like this ridge that these creatures had been spotted on. And she goes out there to take photos. Her and her husband were attacked in the woods. She lost her life. The husband escaped with the media said that she died in an inch of water, 2 inches of water, something just crazy, like literally 2 inches of water, if that. But she didn't. So the media and the government made it sound like her husband was the culprit. Okay. Her husband was taken, questioned, and released. Now, crazy thing about this is after he was released, no one saw him ever again. His wife's bank account, the executor, whatever, was her sister. The house remained empty for, years. No sign of the husband. And what ended up happening is the government shut this guy up. They made him like the scapegoat, and they pretty much disappeared him. Not a cent has been touched out of their bank account, and the house has remained empty. Yet he was released. Okay. If he was the culprit, obviously he would be in prison and people would know. They'd be like, yes, the husband did it, this, and that. So she was attacked. They were attacked by Dogman. She died. They needed a culprit, a cover-up, patsy. The husband fit the bill. And either they gave him a whole new life and said, never mention it again and get the hell out of Dodge, or they offed him, or they put him in some dungeon-like prison where he'll never be seen again. Just really a crazy story. If you read into it and look into it, you will see exactly what I mean. It makes no sense. And right there, North Carolina, 15 dogmen lurking about just in one national park in North Carolina. If that doesn't say epicenter, I don't know what does, especially sending the government out there, So we'll hit West Virginia, 5-state epicenter, and call it a day. All right, this is West Virginia. Jeff, I'd like to start off by saying I recently discovered your channel. I am now obsessed. LOL. Last year, my fiance had an encounter with what I believe to be two strange cryptids, dogmen, not sure. He was in his 18-wheeler driving by a state park in West Virginia. He was able to stop the truck and look at the first creature for maybe a minute. The creature was within feet of his truck and unafraid and undeterred by the noise of the truck. He saw the creature pick up a dead deer lying next to the road, run over an embankment. The second one was running to cross the road. After he got home, he told me about his encounter. He was shaken and shocked by what he saw. He said the thing was huge. He said he wasn't looking down on it from the truck, but looking out at it. As he said this, thing looked like it could have ripped the truck to pieces if it wanted to. I began researching and reached out to an investigator. The closest thing I found to comparing it to is the Andrewsarchus, which there has been 2 other sightings of a creature similar to it. It's a huge hyena-like creature, prehistoric. There were 2. The 2 were in a state park, and 1 was 5 miles away. A lady saw a baby one of these. West Virginia. And I remember having this lady on the show to share the experience. And, you're in an 18-wheeler. You're not looking down. You're looking out at it. That's a big monster. So that was just a couple of experiences. I mean, this is a stack out of the 5-state or eastern 5-state epicenter of these creatures' sightings. And to me, the theory makes sense. Within the next couple of days, the research equipment that I ordered will be here, and we will deep dive into this, and hopefully we can put some puzzle pieces together. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for supporting the channel. It is, after all, your support that keeps the channel growing and going, and what gives us, the subscribers, a place and a chance to share their experiences and theories judgment-free. Just simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, the most precious gift we could be given, our children, our pets, the greatest alarm system, family and friends, the ones that mean the most. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. And until next time, never stop asking questions. Never stop searching for the truth. And God bless.